It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. I'm having trouble hearing myself. That's weird. Okay, if that was all over the place, I apologize. It's Feedback Friday! Some of you guys know I have a game dev, part-time day job. And because we're sort of winding down for the holidays, everybody's like, I know what that means. Yeah, the last 2 weeks were insanely busy. And I was working to finish Boss Fight episode 3 for next week, again, next Wednesday. So guess who self-crunched for the last little bit? This guy being a gender neutral term. So I will try to be coherent here. But no promises. And it's too bad because there was a lot of high quality feedback this week. Again, some of the stuff I collected this week is for year-end content next week. I am getting a lot of thinky-doos for the coming year and the next sort of more structured series that I want to tackle. Because Boss Fight only has 2 episodes left after this. That'll take me months, but still. There's 2 ways I'm thinking of going about it. And I'll start some preliminary feedback about this, but there will certainly be a more formal process. The best way to be a part of these sorts of conversations is to become a Patreon. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. People who pay for my content obviously have the biggest voice in how that content is shaped. But what I'm thinking is either a series on trauma, using video game metaphors, not only to explain how trauma works, but also to sort of, I'm not a doctor, but I am somebody who has been down this road. And I found a lot of metaphors and a lot of tactics involved in video games really help me with healing and recovery. And treating trauma isn't about going back to the person you were. That person is gone. Why? Because you learned shit about the world that you can't unsee. It's about becoming a new person that you like, hopefully better. And that's the difference between, post-traumatic damage or post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth is real. So that's my one thought. The other is to actually go totally data. Team up with some statisticians and some researchers and actually do some surveys that we can then do a series on. Real talk about what gamers' real opinions are about stuff. Very similar to the stuff that Brad Glasgow did after Gamergate. I don't know if Brad's interested. I haven't talked to him about this. I'm just spitballing right now. I don't know. But, him and Chris Ferguson published the papers, yada, yada, yada. That's another thing I'm noodling over. Something that's more sort of data crunching that I can be the face of because there is a demand for more data. And, hopefully I'll be able to scratch my storytelling itch through actual games. I don't know. We'll see how that'll work out. But I'm curious what you guys think. On to your feedback. There was a lot more positive feedback this week than I thought there would be. One criticizes a CD Projekt Red game at their own peril. I have learned that in the past, no matter how founded your criticisms are, some people are very attached to CD Projekt Red games, or should I say people were very attached to CD Projekt Red as a brand. That spell seems to have been broken. Oh, Lord. I've talked to a bunch of people who said I've never seen people turn on a company this completely, this fast. Not BioWare, not EA, not nobody. And I think that's because just, Occam's razor, right? When gamers say what they want more than anything is authenticity and people telling it to them straight and honesty and transparency and, the dreaded word ethics. And, just they expect mistakes. They expect stumbles. They want them to be honest mistakes and stumbles, not an attempt to deceive, not an attempt to conceal, not an attempt to con them out of their hard-earned money. You know, maybe that's just true. And maybe people should stop reading more into it and just kind of listen on that point and go, yeah, this is consistent with everything that happened with CD Projekt Red. They had so much goodwill coming into Cyberpunk, and wow. And maybe I'll start there, because there was an interesting comment that, like I said, I hadn't played a lot of the game when I made this video. I've played more now, but I'm trying to find the comment now. Oh no. One person said that NemoFett said, "Hey Leanne, I'm going to throw something out here. Maybe their apology was a bit weasel worded because the game is limited by the PS4 Xbone. Maybe they can't, or don't think they can, bring it up to the specs of PC current gen. That's why they're sorry they couldn't show it, because it's not going to get better, but customers should have been aware of what it was." Yes, of course it's not going to look as good as what it's running on my PC. I mean, it's still jank on my PC. Don't get me wrong. If anybody's interested, I'm running pretty much the recommended specs on my PC, and it's still jank. So there you go. But yeah, of course, they're going to have been pushing the crap out of the PS4 Xbone versions, which is why you can't make a game that truly straddles a console crossover. You either need to make it a next-gen game, in this case a PS5, Xbox Series X game, that runs on previous gens. Either there's a massive downgrade in graphics. Even with that, the graphics should not have been as bad as they are on the PS4. And apparently, I've heard mixed things. It's interesting because you think there's some standardization on, one PS4 to another PS4 or one Xbox to another Xbox. But I've got people telling me it's running fine on their Xbox. And then I've got other people saying it's running like hot garbage on their Xbox. I've got people saying it's running like hot garbage on their PS5. The game is just busted. Like, it wasn't ready. It wasn't done. I don't know if anybody else bakes, but every so often something just goes weird. There's too much liquid in the dough. You didn't put enough flour in, and you go to make your cake. What you do is just stick a toothpick in the middle of your cake to see if the middle is cooked. And sometimes it's just not. So you got to put it in for another 5 minutes. That's the equivalent of this game. Now, there's more to it than that. And this is the other comment I want to find. But basically, someone said that crunch isn't to blame for the issues with this game. And I'm here. Okay, here it is. Editor RBR. I wanted to make sure I read this person's name because this is actually a really insightful comment. I would like to see an actual discussion of crunch that does take into consideration that this was being released for next-gen consoles, present-gen consoles, PC, and streaming services. I don't think there's been a more ambitious cross-platform, cross-device release in the 30 years I've been puttering around gaming. And to date, I have not seen a single criticism address that fact. The game was always going to have bugs, and it was always going to have substantial bugs, but I don't think we can necessarily lay that failure to mitigate at the feet of crunch. It needed another 6 months of development and beta across all platforms, and then a few weeks back in the oven. This was a corporate fuck-up that was born of ambitious devs and horrific 2020 horrific 2020. So there's a typo there, financially speaking, such as the corporate demands get this out in Q4. Spot on. I have made comments in the past, but it's fine if you haven't watched every single one of my videos. I get it. I produce a lot of content every week. I have made comments about how I thought that the number of platforms this game was released on was foolhardy. But I I would say it even goes deeper than that. Editor RBR is spot on right that crunch doesn't explain all the problems with this game. And I was talking about this when I was streaming the game yesterday on Twitch. I may port this over so that people have something else to watch. Because there are design problems in Cyberpunk that cannot be laid at the feet of crunch. And I actually said on Twitch, the management and leadership problems led to crunch. Crunch did not create the management and leadership problems. Cyberpunk is a game more like The Witcher 2, highly ambitious, breaks the mold in a lot of ways because they want to innovate, but it's a hot mess that doesn't work in some ways. I know some people love The Witcher 2, but just from a budgeting and resource allocation perspective and just the memory leak in that game that was never fixed and a bunch of other things, The Witcher 2 was when CDPR was still like an up-and-coming hotshot company. They weren't really a AAA dev yet. It wasn't a true AAA experience. It was indie on steroids, right? And it reflected that. There were a lot of things that just made no sense from a resource allocation perspective. You're going to make a character playable for a hot 5 minutes. Why? Makes no sense. Not in current year sort of thing. The year the game came out. Even back then, it was like, why would you make a character playable with an animated run cycle for 20 minutes of playtime? This makes no bloody sense. The Witcher 3 was a more cohesive experience that was just more polished overall and respected the player more. Cyberpunk is more of that Witcher 2 experience. They broke things to see if they could do them better, wanting to give players more value, wanting to create an innovative experience. It didn't work as often as it does. The biggest tangible detail, two areas of tangible detail, and again, this has nothing to do with crunch. This is bad design from the jump. The user interface is a hot mess, and I actually broke this down on Twitch on Thursday. I showed people times during combat where I had to look 3 different places at minimum to get the information I needed to execute a command. What I want to do was here, the way to do it was here, and the impact it would have on the game world was up here. Your eyes cannot look that many places at once. It's a mistake. It's an amateur mistake. They were doing form over function on the menus, and it's just a mistake. Similarly, the menus, the journal, the quest management, the inventory management, the leveling up, everything is just too complicated. They use submenus when they shouldn't use submenus, and they don't use submenus when they should. They reinvented the wheel and just got a wheel that didn't work terribly well. I don't know why they decided they needed to have, for instance, a backpack and an inventory. I don't get that. I also don't understand why they decided to have a journal, but you have an inventory and a backpack, but you don't have a journal and then a separate missions tab. It's flipping, instead of consistently deciding, okay, we're going to skew our design this way. So once people figure out what we're doing, then, okay, fine. They know which way we lean. No, they lean one way on one thing and the completely opposite way on another. It's just scattered. It's a mess. It's like the hallucinations of a dying brain in places. And that's not crunch. That stuff should have been locked in like years ago. The basics of how the menus were going to function? Come on. The other thing I noted, the combat does settle down after a very rough start. However, loot drops, I love loot. I love switching things out. I love getting more powerful weapons. It's fucking overdone. It's like too human overdone. Yeah, I went there. Right. Inventory management is at too human levels. Again, that is a design choice. That is not crunch. And the hacking mini games, the tutorial is misleading. I am really struggling with the hacking mini games, not because I don't understand the basic concept, because I was doing it wrong based on the tutorial for so long that when people in chat, thank God for chat, explained to me how I was doing it right, now I have to unlearn the mistake instead of learning it right the first time. Like, how? With all the money and all the time. They had 7-8 years on this game. There's no excuse for it being this sloppy. The reason is poor leadership. The reason is somebody who didn't have the foresight to go, no, guys, we're halfway through development. We have to make the best game we can with what we have. We have to stop mixing this batter. We have to bake this cake now, okay? And I think I've made my editor RBR. I hope that you see the ridiculous number of console launches. I think that's a slightly different error, but it is still management thinking that more is good. Yes, Zelda. And it's often not. This idea to make it available on all these different platforms simultaneously, I really think that wasn't a good call. Watch Dogs tried it without Stadia and shit. Like, they just tried it on, like, last gen, current gen with, like, the PS3 to PS4 and Xbox crossover. And even then, they struggled. Doing more than that was monkey nuts. Like, they should have known better. It should have been a current gen title that they took a few more months to release it on next gen. And I get that they wanted this big swanky launch title or near launch title for the next gen consoles, but there's a reason you don't do that. There's a reason you pick a lane. If you want to make a ton of money back, you make a game for the current generation install. You don't, make a game for a system that's in relatively few people's homes. The only reason you make a game that early in a console cycle is because that console has technology that executes your vision in a way that the current gen just can't. Like if you have something that's heavily reliant on those, super quick load transitions, make it a PS5 Xbox Series X exclusive. That's smart, right? But if you want a big experience that is very expensive and therefore you have to sell oodles and oodles and oodles of copies, do it for current gen, man. Do it for current gen. Just, I know it's not as exciting, but learn from the Ghost of Tsushima success. Haiku. Sometimes simpler is better. Right. Okay, so on to the award shows. That was a surprising amount of consensus on this one. And that shocked me. And bless, like, okay, we're on to something here. People are like, all right, yeah. So why didn't the people in charge of these awards make this call? If I can figure it out, I'm smart. I'm no, like, subatomic genius, okay? Like, I ain't that great a brain, especially when I'm really freaking tired and exhausted. Why didn't anybody else think of this midpoint? Why didn't anybody else think of this happy medium? I mean, people went because Dorito Pope, but that doesn't explain the other side. Rebecca Solar Willpower said, great points, Leanne. I broadly agree. I know you're generally against unionizing game devs, but I feel like there needs to be some sort of pressure on management to prevent crunch and actually deal with abusers. Motion Twin, the devs of Dead Cells, is a co-op where all staff are paid equally and has zero hierarchy. And while that type of company has its own problems, at least they are trying something different. I want to clarify my stance on the whole idea of unionization. Because there are the unions that like represent teachers. Then there are the unions that represent police. Then there are the unions that represent, auto workers. Then there are the entertainment unions. And while entertainment unions do to a certain extent help, they do more harm than good in a lot of ways because it makes it impossible. It makes it much harder to break into the industry, and it makes it much harder to change jobs if you're not happy where you are. Because, and I saw this. I saw guys, they were mostly guys because they were camera and sound operators, but some producers as well, though a lot of producers weren't union because we were management. But they stayed in a job they hated because as long as they stayed in that job they hated, they had seniority. If they quit and went to another job, they'd be junior, bottom of the totem pole. That is death in creative industries. People have to be able to move around. They have to be able to start new projects. They have to be able to work with the teams that when you find people you work with well, you have kind of a mind meld. I said to somebody today that I work with that I was, advocating bringing this person on board to work with me on a project. And I said, we know each other so well. We work so well together that we can tell each other to fuck off and or that we're being fucking stupid. And there's enough trust there that it isn't a breakdown in a relationship. Like, it is worth your weight in gold to find somebody you can fight with without it being a deal breaker. I'm not kidding. You may think I'm crazy. This is real. When you find someone you can fight with, and like the minute the fight is over, it's over. There's no bad blood. There's no lingering resentment. Hold on to that person for dear life, especially if you're trying to create something. They are one of the most valuable people you will ever meet, because in order to make something good, you have to fight, and you have to fight early. You have to have the important fights early in a process and survive. Because if you try not to rock the boat early on, you're going to end up with hot garbage. And, I really support the idea of unions. I do not support the way unions work in creative industries. And my happy medium solution is trade organizations, industry standards, oversight bodies that the various publishers opt into. They submit to oversight to maintain workplace conditions and certain standards, common standards across the industry, so that no one has to be the only one that goes to their shareholders and say, they're the parent company, their financiers, and goes, we don't want to crunch. If there's an oversight body saying, nope, crunch bad, then everybody's rowing the same way. Everybody's dealing with the same stipulations. There's cover. And there's no union dues there. That's not the same as organized labor. And so if people are really unhappy, if they're working for somebody super abusive, they can just leave and go somewhere else. They can look for another opportunity. Or if, say, they don't want to live in that city anymore, they want to go back somewhere closer to home, they want to work remotely, whatever, they can do that. That portability and flexibility is essential for things like game dev. Otherwise, you get the same really bad separation that happens in Canada in our television industry, where there are, independent productions that are cut off from a lot of funding models But, you know, they create innovative, interesting stuff more and more for the internet, less and less for TV. And then you have the behemoths that just turn out shit so that they can hit their Canadian content numbers so that they can go and just buy American programming, which is the thing they really want to do. So we have to be very, very careful if we move towards some sort of, like I said, I'm more in favor of a trade association than unionization because of these reasons, because of my experiences in various industries. We have to be very, very careful in that in making things better, we don't kill the things that make gaming great. I hope that makes sense. I want to move on to another comment because this cracked me up, because I needed a minute to figure out what John was saying here. But the quote was, Leanna, she didn't crunch anyone. Joel, I beg to differ. And I'm like, what? And then I realized, oh, because I was talking about, what's her name? Laura Bailey and Abby crunch Joel. Right? I get it. Funny joke. Well done, John. I needed a minute, but that made me laugh. Woodworm made a really good counterpoint. The Crunch Awards, edit. If you love your job, would you really sacrifice so much around it that you may not be able to continue doing the job you love? Woodworm, that was exactly the understanding I came to in television. And as much as I said off the top, I've been crunching with video games. Oh my God, the crunch was worse than TV. We didn't have a name for it. It was just television. Okay. That was just it. You know, unless you have a union job, you're working your ass off because you're disposable. People can fire you at any moment. And when you're a woman in a producer job where I worked, oh yeah, they looked for reasons to make you the enemy. And that is not my opinion. That's just known at this point. But anyway, on to happier things. That's the point, right? Like, if you love your job, you want to be able to continue doing it. No matter how much you love your job, if your body is literally failing you, you can't continue. I mean, I ended up with a bunch of health conditions because people just let me work and work and work and work and never take vacations and work and work and work and work and kill myself until I couldn't do it anymore, and then they got rid of me. That's not that somebody doesn't love their work. That's people didn't love that person. People didn't value that person. They were just a disposable commodity, and they thought people were interchangeable. And, you know, after the person's burned out, it's like, oh, gee, they were really great about that. Oops. Stop this. Right? Okay. So is there anything else to do? Because I'm coming up on time. I talked about that. No. Okay. I did, because the rest are feedback questions, and those will be handled next week. So hope you guys liked this Feedback Friday. My God, I got through it. Apologies for any incoherencies. I'm like right now. But maybe that's amusing. If it's amusing, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/AnnaK. Remember, patrons get feedback bonuses, perks, whatever. Thanks for watching.